there's never been a more exciting time to be in the field of HR than now. So this is the time to be in the HR space. But at the same time, I also believe that never before have we needed HR to not think and act like HR. Now imagine for a minute you're an alien. You've come to planet Earth to make some observations about us humans, and you come down in your little spaceship and you spend some time here. Think about some of the things that you would observe. First thing you'd probably notice, there are around 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. Average lifespan around 70 to 80 years, depending on where you look. And from these 7.5 billion people, almost everybody on planet Earth does this thing called work. And from all of these people on planet Earth that do this thing called work, almost all of them don't like their jobs. They don't feel like the organizations or the managers appreciate them, and they, in general, don't like their jobs. Now, consider for a minute that if you look up the word employee in the dictionary, you'll find that synonyms for the word employee include cog, servant, and slave. It gets better. If you look up the word manager in the dictionary, you'll find that synonyms include slave driver, boss, and my personal favorite one, zookeeper. And if you look up the word work in the dictionary, you will find that synonyms for the word work include daily grind, drudgery, and struggle. Now, if you put these three things together, we're all cogs working for you zookeepers as we go about our daily drudgery. Wow. Work sucks. And this is literally how we have built our organizations over the last 10, 50, 100, 150 years, on top of these very outdated ways of thinking about work. Now, I know all of you sitting in this room think you're in human resources, but actually, I want to encourage you to think that you're not in human resources, you're in human transformation. Human resources is the cog, zookeeper, drudgery world. You are in the world of human transformation now. And it's a very different place to be in. You know, there used to be a time when you could smoke in the office. There used to be a time when you could work 9 to 5. And there used to be a time when if your organization had a job that it wanted to fill, it would put up the posting, and people would line up wanting to take that job. And one by one, these employees would try to convince you why they should work for you. They would talk about all their skills, all their accomplishments, the wonderful schools that they went to, and they would try so hard to convince you why you should hire them. Now look at the world that we live in today. You don't smoke in the office. This idea of working 9 to 5 has largely been replaced by work-life integration. And today, when you have a job you want to fill, and when candidates come through your door, and you say, this is our company, all of a sudden now they're asking you questions. What is it like to work here? Am I going to feel a sense of purpose? What are the values of the organization? What's the managerial style like? What tools am I going to be using? And so what we're starting to see is now it's you that are trying to convince the employees why they should work for you. And that's a very, very different way for us to think about work. You have to convince employees why they should work for you. And traditionally, organizations around the world have done this in one of two ways. The first thing that companies have always done is they've all told stories about their organizations. All wonderful places to work. All amazing technologies that we use. The managers and the leaders here love you. It's wonderful. It's amazing. In fact, if you were to turn to any one of your peers and ask them, what is it like to work at your company, I bet that they would all tell you it's amazing. Every company always says that about themselves. Now, I tried online dating before I got married. And one of the things that I found about online dating, and if you have tried online dating, I'm sure you'll agree, is that oftentimes the person whose profile you see online and the person who shows up to the date, not the same person. Or it could just be me, I don't know. And so I think the same thing is happening inside of our organizations. On paper, we all want to be amazing. We all want to tell employees we have wonderful technologies, beautiful workspaces, great perks, beautiful managers that love you, right? On paper, we all want to sound like that. But then what starts to happen is when employees start working there, they find out that it doesn't really add up. Now imagine for a minute what would happen if when employees wanted to work for your organization, you were brutally honest with them about what it was like to work there. And so you have a candidate sitting across from you, and they ask you what it's like to work there, and you say, well, I know that we say that you're going to be working 40 hours a week. Really, it's like 60. We do have a flexible work program, but if you take advantage of it, you're going to be stigmatized as being lazy, so you don't want to do that. Managers might take some credit for your work. The technologies look like they were designed in the 70s and the 80s, and I hope you like sitting in a box. Do you want to work here? Who's going to say yes? Nobody. And so we all tell these wonderful stories about our organizations and what it's like to work there. So that's been one common thing that organizations have done to try to convince employees to be there. The second thing that companies have been doing for a few decades now is they've been investing in something known as employee engagement. I'm willing to bet that probably everybody in this room has some sort of an employee engagement program that's going on inside of your company. And like I said, this has been going on for a few decades now. But the really interesting thing that I find is that for the past few decades, we've never spent more time, more money, more resources investing in employee engagement programs, yet somehow, what's happening to the employee engagement scores? They're either going down. If you're lucky, they might be staying the same. How does that make any sense? You would think that if we're putting more time and resources and effort into something, that the scores should be going up. But they're not. So why? I think that most organizations around the world view employee engagement today as an adrenaline shot. Now, mind you, employee engagement had very good intentions when it was first started, when it was created, but most organizations today view it as an adrenaline shot. So what do I mean? Now, let's be honest, right? When people start working at your company on day one, nobody starts off saying, this place sucks. Doesn't happen. On day one, employees are genuinely excited to be there, right? They want to make an impact. They want to find out who am I going to be working with, what projects am I going to be working on. They are genuinely excited to be a part of your organization. Now, something happens over time where an employee's satisfaction starts to go down a little bit. And right about here, our company says, we want to do our annual employee engagement survey. And you do your annual employee engagement survey, and you get a 62. And you freak out a little bit. And you turn to HR, and you say, guys, that's not cool. We need to get like a 95 at least, like whatever that means. And so, typically inside of most organizations, they think of what they can do to boost that employee engagement. And so they bring some smart people together, sit around at a table, and they say, genius idea. We're going to introduce hot yoga on Tuesdays. And you introduce hot yoga on Tuesday, and guess what? It works for a little bit. Your employee engagement numbers go up. And then they go back down again. And again, you do the employee engagement survey, you get some smart people together, and you say, well, now what do we do? And now all of a sudden you say, another genius idea. How about we give them free food on Fridays? Again, the employee engagement numbers go back up. And this is what happens inside of most organizations around the world. They view employee engagement as an adrenaline shot. Now, one of the really interesting things that I find is usually around here, this is when organizations say, we want to empower our people. But guess what? On day one, employees are empowered, right? What happens inside of most companies is we disempower them, and then we empower them again. So what would it be like if we didn't disempower employees to begin with? So this is the adrenaline shot that happens in most organizations around the world. They focus on short-term perks and benefits to try to drive long-term change. And it doesn't work. Now, in psychology, there's a concept known as the hedonic treadmill. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it. And the hedonic treadmill basically states that we adapt, right? We get used to things. And so for a while, the hot yoga might seem cool, right? For a couple of months, it's interesting, it's fun, it's exciting, it's new. And so our engagement goes up, our satisfaction goes up a little bit. But over time, we get used to it. It just becomes something that we expect. And then the organization has to do something else. And then we get used to that. And then the organization has to do something else. And this is the cycle that most companies around the world go through. And this is actually a very dangerous way to build an organization, because what it does is it conditions your employees to be with your organizations because of things that they get. Not because of value that they provide, not because of value that you give to them, but because of things that they get. Now pretend for a minute you're in a relationship with somebody simply because you get nice things. What happens one day when you don't get that nice thing? You leave, and you go elsewhere. The same thing happens inside of your organizations. When you keep giving employees shiny, wonderful things, these perks, these benefits, they get used to it. And the second it stops, or the second you take something away, they're gone. They're in that relationship because of things that they get. And when they don't get those things, they leave. So this is the big problem that we see in most organizations around the world. They treat employee engagement like an adrenaline shot, and it doesn't work. Now, for a while when I was writing my book, I thought that this notion of employee experience and employee engagement, I thought they were at odds with each other. I thought employee experience is replacing employee engagement, totally two unrelated different things. But the reality is that there's actually quite a bit of relationship between the two. Now, the problem that we've been seeing inside of most organizations around the world is that employee engagement is not the cause of something, it is the outcome of something. You cannot improve something by measuring the outcome. You improve something by measuring the cause. So the cause of an engaged workforce is the employee experience. You invest in the employee experience, you get an engaged workforce. When you have an engaged workforce, then you have the ROI. And so we've just been stuck focusing and looking at and measuring the wrong thing. So instead, what we need to do is focus on this notion of employee experience, which leads to an engaged workforce, which will then lead to ROI. But what does this actually mean? What is employee experience? Now, how is it that some organizations around the world are consistently one step ahead of the competition? How is it that some organizations around the world continuously appear to be developing better products and services than others? And how is it that some organizations around the world are just seemingly outperforming the competition all the time? I had the privilege of interviewing a psychologist by the name of Thomas Gilovich not that long ago. And Thomas Gilovich had this really interesting research project that he did where he looked at what happens to our satisfaction levels depending on if we invest in a physical good or an experience. And what he found is that if you purchase a physical good, an iPhone, for example, what happens is over time your satisfaction goes down. But if you invest in an experience, over time, your satisfaction goes up. That's what some of the world's leading companies have figured out. How do we make it feel like when employees start working here, they didn't just buy something, they invested in an experience? Now, I looked at 252 organizations around the world as part of a research project that I did. I interviewed around 150, 160 senior level executives in HR, in IT, in various roles. And I went through just as many case studies, articles, and research reports to try to find out, what does employee experience mean? What does it look like? Now, if employee engagement has become this idea of investing in perks and benefits to distract employees from the reality of what it's like to work there, then I think employee experience is changing the core workplace practices inside of your company around your people. Changing the core workplace practices inside of your company around your people. Now, the perks and the benefits, it doesn't mean they're bad. They could be things that you use, but they're not a strategy. They are not the core strategy that your organization should focus on. So, 252 organizations I mentioned that I looked at. Out of the 252 organizations that I looked at, and by the way, these include all the Fortune 100, all the Fortune 100 best places to work, Glassdoor's top 50 organizations to work for, and then a few others that I was just personally interested in. From all of these companies, only 6% do an amazing job of investing in employee experience. 6%. And these are organizations like a LinkedIn, like a Cisco, like a Microsoft, a Riot Games, an Airbnb. Only 6% of organizations. Half of companies are either doing nothing, right? They're in the not good category, or they're in the how are they still in business category. Half of organizations, and like I said, these include all the Fortune 100. So this is a scary number. But the good news is that for organizations that do an amazing job of investing in employee experience, there is a significant ROI of doing so. And I looked at the ROI in 3 different layers. The first thing is that when I interviewed executives, I would ask them, are you seeing any benefit of investing in employee experience? And they would all say, yeah, we see productivity, employees look a little bit happier. You know, it was kind of anecdotal. And I said, OK, that's fine, fair enough. The second layer of ROI that I tried to look at is best of lists. So I took these 6% of organizations that scored highly on my employee experience index, and I looked at how often will they appear on other best of lists. Best places to work, top companies for HR, smartest companies, greenest companies, those types of lists that we're all familiar with. And there, too, I found that organizations who invest in employee experience appear on these other lists 2 times as often, 10 times as often, up to 40 times as often. The next thing that I looked at was business metrics. Do these organizations see any kind of actual ROI from investing in employee experience? And here, too, we see higher profit per employee, revenue per employee. These companies are on average 24% smaller, meaning that they are doing more with less. And lastly, I looked at stock price performance. I created fictitious portfolios for different categories of companies, and I compared them against each other. And I compared them against the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, again, Fortune 100 best places to work. And here, too, I found that organizations who do an amazing job of investing in employee experience crush, and I don't use that word lightly, crush the competition across every metric that I looked at. So this isn't just a nice thing to do. This is something that has a very tangible, a very real, a very solid ROI behind it. Now, the good news for employee experience. Every single employee experience at every company around the world is just a combination of 3 environments that all of you can control. 3 environments shape every single employee experience at every company around the world: culture, technology, and physical space. How do employees feel when they're doing the jobs that they're doing? What tools and resources do they have access to? And what are the spaces in which employees work? 3 environments that shape every employee experience for every company around the world. Now, if you look at this, you'll notice that work itself is not a part of the employee experience equation. Why not? I don't think we give enough credit to the fact that employees actually pick their work. I mean, think about it. It's the employee who decides the school that they're going to go to, the major that they want. The employee decides the company that they apply for, the role that they apply for. So when you hire an employee in sales, that employee knows exactly what they're doing. They opted in to do sales. Their job is to close deals. I'm sure this has happened to you. You have had a job for an organization at some point in your life, and you didn't like the job. And you went to go work elsewhere. Different company, but same industry, same company size, same geographic location. In fact, you're doing the same kind of work. But now, all of a sudden, you love your job. What changed? It's not the work that you're doing. It's the environments in which the work get done. It's how you feel about doing your job. It's the tools and resources you have access to do your job. And it's where you get your job done. This is the employee experience equation. Now, oftentimes companies view this as three separate things, but they are very much connected. Culture impacts technology, technology impacts physical space impacts culture. These are not three separate buckets. Let's start with physical space. Physical space comprises 30% of an employee's overall experience. And the physical space refers to the art that might hang on the wall, the cubicles, the open floor plan. All of these things are a part of the physical space. It's one that you can see and touch and taste and breathe in. And researchers from MIT and Harvard have actually found that the physical space acts as a symbol of your organization. It's not just a space in which employees work, it's a symbol that represents what your organization stands for, at least in the eyes of your employees. A symbol that represents what your company stands for. Think of your favorite superhero. Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man. Right? Their symbols are all the logos that they wear on their uniforms. Your symbol of your company for your people is the space in which employees work. And there's been this big debate for a while, and I'm sure you remember hearing this debate, that spaces are all going to go away, and we're all going to be in co-working facilities, and nobody's ever going to show up to work anymore. But in fact, we've seen the exact opposite. In fact, now what's starting to happen is companies are redesigning their spaces, and the physical space is reemerging to be like an employee experience center. It's a very different way for us to think about the way that spaces are built. And if you walk into an organization, like an Airbnb, for example, you'll notice that the space in which you work starts to feel a little bit like home, because we're seeing this blurring of work and life. And so, too, we're seeing spaces that are bringing in home into work. Imagine for a minute if you had a house, and your house had one room, a kitchen, and everything that you did during the course of the day had to be done in that kitchen. You showered there, you slept there, you ate there, you entertained there, everything was in the kitchen. You'd probably say, that's not a good house. So why then is it okay for employees to work in a single environment? Now consider that we spend almost as much time at work as we do at home. We wouldn't want to live in a house that had one room. Why would we want to work in a space that had one type of floor plan? Doesn't make any sense. That's why companies around the world are redesigning their spaces to create multiple floor plans inside of them. Now there's a simple test that you can use to see if you work for an organization that has a great space. You write down your values on a sheet of paper. These values might be things like trust, fun, collaboration, transparency, whatever they might be. Write them down on a sheet of paper and walk around your space the next time you show up to work. And try to see if these values are physically manifested in the spaces in which employees work. Do you see trust? Do you see collaboration? Do you see fun? Do you see transparency? If you don't, then these values in the eyes of your employees are nothing more than things that are written on paper. The values need to be physically manifested in the spaces in which employees work. So again, physical space, 30% of the employee's overall experience. The second environment, technology. Technology refers to the devices, the hardware, the software, the apps, all these tools that we use during the course of our day to get our jobs done. Technology is the central nervous system of the organization. And we always believe that technology is an IT thing, don't we? We always think that technology's, those IT guys over there, they handle that. But what happens is when technology breaks down inside of your company, so do all of the human aspects inside of your company, don't they? I mean, think about what happens. If technology breaks down, trust, collaboration, communication, all of these things break down. These are human things, not technology things. So when technology breaks down, so do the human aspects around technology. Most of the concepts that we hear about when we think of the future of work, real-time recognition and feedback, communication and collaboration at scale, all of this stuff, it's powered by technology. right? You cannot build these things inside of your organization unless you have these tools and resources in place. A year and a half ago, I went to go speak to a large financial institution. And I gave a talk to around 300 of their most senior executives. And after my talk, I had the opportunity to meet with and interview some of their employees one-on-one. Nobody else present, no managers, no executives, just me and employees one-on-one, closed doors. And I interviewed these employees, and one by one, they all told me the same thing. We love our corporate culture. We love our physical space. We're all looking for a new job. And I thought, why would you want a new job? You love the corporate culture here. Your spaces are beautiful. Why would you ever want to go work elsewhere? It was a technology problem. There was no real-time recognition and feedback. There was no flexible work. They were constantly duplicating each other's work. Right? They became very frustrated, and the human aspects around that broke down. They started to resent the company. They became disengaged. They no longer wanted to work there. Technology is always a choice, isn't it? Which is funny because, especially in the world of AI and automation, we keep hearing about AI is going to take jobs. But AI is not a thing that's just going to come and take things, is it? AI, technology, these are tools, and we control how we use tools. Technology is a choice. And when we say that jobs are lost, I don't think that's the right phrase to use. Jobs don't get lost. It's not as if they're a set of keys that you misplace and say, oop, I lost my job. Jobs get taken, and they get taken in one of two ways. The first way that a job gets taken is that if an organization decides it wants to take your job. If an organization makes a conscious decision that it is going to use technology to replace people, then a job gets taken. Now, we've seen some organizations around the world, Accenture, for example, automated 10,000 jobs a year and a half ago. Didn't lose a single person. How? The 10,000 jobs that they automated were in their finance department. And these were number crunchers, people that were putting together different numbers and presenting those spreadsheets to clients. That's now all done by bots. And what Accenture did is they upskilled these 10,000 employees to be strategic advisors to their clients. And so Accenture made a choice that it didn't want to replace people, it wanted to help them. And we will see many organizations make that choice. We will also see some organizations decide that they do want to replace people. But I think the organizations who will win are the ones that are going to decide that they are going to augment people. Look at McDonald's, another great example. They've been putting in kiosks in a lot of their restaurants all over the world. And when I spoke with their chief people officer, I said, look, there's a lot of concern that you're putting in all these kiosks and you're going to lose all of the people that work in your restaurants. Are you seeing a decrease in headcount? And David, their chief people officer, said, actually, not only are we not seeing a decrease in headcount, but in some stores, we're increasing our headcount. And I said, well, how can that be the case? And he said, because we're shifting our model to being more of a service business. The organizations who will win, I think, are the ones that are going to use AI to explore new opportunities, to augment humans, to help humans, not replace them. The second way that a job gets taken depends on you. If you stand idly by, if you depend on and rely on educational institutions and on companies to teach you everything that you need to know to be successful in life, you're going to be at risk. You have to become a perpetual learner. You have to learn how to learn. You have to take more accountability over your own personal and professional development. The CEO of AT&T recently went in front of his entire company and said, look, if you are not willing to teach yourself the things you need to know to be successful, you should quit. We'll give you the tools, we'll give you the resources, we'll support you. But it might take some of your resources, it might take some of your time to step up and learn these things. And if you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't work here. So the second way that a job gets taken is if you just stand idly by and do nothing. Become a perpetual learner. Technology also 30% of an employee's overall experience. The last environment, corporate culture. Corporate culture is 40% of the employee's overall experience. And unlike the other two environments, corporate culture isn't one that you can see or touch or taste or breathe in. Corporate culture is the one that you feel. And there are all sorts of interesting ways that we use to describe corporate culture, isn't there? Some of us say that corporate culture is what happens when the manager leaves the room. I like to think of corporate culture as the side effects of working for your company. Now, you probably had this happen. You're watching a show on TV, and in the middle of a show, you get a commercial for a prescription drug. And after the commercial for that drug is over, the side effects come up. And the side effects for this prescription drug include nausea, weight gain, skin discoloration, bleeding from the eyes, and in some cases, death. And sometimes I look at those commercials and I think, who in their right loony-toony mind is going to take that kind of a drug? But then I realized that most people in the world work for organizations that have the exact same side effects. Let that sink in. Most people in the world work for organizations where from prolonged exposure, you argue with your spouse, you gain weight, you lose your hair, bleeding from the eyes. We've all been to those meetings, don't lie. And in some cases, death. So why is it that we don't want to take that prescription drug, yet we're willing to subject ourselves to work for those organizations day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year? Doesn't make any sense. I was never a good student. My high school GPA was a 2.79. Then I went to community college. My GPA bumped up to a whopping 2.8. Parents were very proud. And then I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz, banana slugs. And at the University of California, Santa Cruz, I double majored in economics and psychology. I worked really hard, graduated with honors, and was super excited to join the corporate world. And my first job out of college, I went to go work for an organization. And for this particular organization, when I interviewed there, they said, look, you're going to be interviewing executives, you're going to be meeting with entrepreneurs, you're really going to enjoy working here, it's just a beautiful place to work. And I thought, great. So I took the job, and I was willing to forego my 3-hour daily commute in Los Angeles, bumper-to-bumper traffic on the 101 and the 405, worst traffic in the United States. But I said, this seems like a cool place, I'll take the job. A couple of months into my job, I'm doing data entry, I'm doing cold calling, and I'm doing PowerPoint presentations. And one day, the CEO comes out of his nice, beautiful corner office, and he says, Jacob, get over here, I got a really important project for you. Naturally, I got excited. I ran over to the CEO, and I said, yes, what is it? What are we going to be working on? And he puts his hand in his pocket, and from his pocket, he produces his wallet. From his wallet, he takes out a nice, crisp, clean $10 bill, slaps the $10 bill in my hand, and says, I'm late for a meeting. I need you to go run down to Starbucks and get me a cup of coffee. And get yourself a latte as well. What, are you out of your damn mind? This is why I worked so hard in college, is to get you a cup of coffee? Get your own stupid cup of coffee. That's what I thought on the inside. On the outside, I said, of course, I would love to get you that cup of coffee. And that was one of the last full-time jobs I've ever had almost a decade ago. Now, contrast this to a story that's oftentimes told about when President Kennedy went to go visit the NASA Space Center. And in the middle of a tour, he sees a man walking down the hall with a broom and a bucket. And President Kennedy stops the tour, and he goes up to the man, and he says, hi, I'm President Kennedy. What do you do here? And he says, I help put a man on the moon. He doesn't say, I sweep the bathroom floors. He doesn't say, I restock paper towels in the restroom. He says, I help put a man on the moon. It's a very different type of corporate culture, isn't it? Airbnb actually does something interesting when we think of corporate culture. Airbnb has a practice known as elephants, dead fish, and vomit. I know, sounds a little weird. And these are 3 things that they bring up during all of their meetings. So what are elephants? Elephants are the big things in the room that nobody wants to address. Right? The big things in the room that nobody wants to address. They bring that up first. Dead fish. What are the things that people are upset about that happened a few years ago, but they just can't let go of? Right? We all know those things. And nobody ever wants to bring them up. They bring that up in all of their meetings. And the third thing, vomit, which is exactly what it sounds like, just blah. Tell us what's on your mind. Tell us what you're thinking, what's troubling you. What do you want us to know? Elephants, dead fish, and vomit. Sounds weird, but it really helps shape their corporate culture inside of their organization. Corporate culture is something that is learned, and it's learned by behaviors that we take and actions that we take. Corporate culture, again, 40% of the overall employee experience. And this is the employee experience equation. This is what everybody in this room has the power to shape and control and change. Every single experience for every employee, even those in this room, is shaped by these three things. How employees feel doing the work that they're doing, the tools and resources that they have access to, and the spaces in which employees work. Sometimes people look at this and they say, well, Jacob, what's the low-hanging fruit? Right? Common business speak. But unfortunately, there is no low-hanging fruit. This is the fruit that's on the tallest tree, on the highest branch, that's blowing in the wind, that looks like the fruit's about to fall off. There's no low-hanging fruit. You can't just pick one of these things. Your organization has to do an amazing job of investing in all three of these things because they're all connected and they all shape the experiences of your people. So where can we start? Where can we start creating and thinking about and designing employee experiences? There are a few things that all of you in this room can start doing. The first is memorize this. Memorize this employee experience equation, and everything that you do inside of your company, filter it through these three environments. How is what we're doing going to impact the way that employees feel? How is what we're doing going to impact the tools and resources that employees have access to do their jobs? And how is what we're doing going to impact the spaces and the ways in which employees work? That's step one. The second thing that all of you can do is you put people in positions of power who care. Oftentimes, we put people in positions of power who bring in the most amount of money. And then we try to teach them leadership skills. Now, these people might be great individual contributors, but they're not necessarily good at leading and inspiring and engaging and motivating people. Find those inside of your organization who are good at engaging, empowering, inspiring, and motivating others. Promote them, and then teach them the traditional management skills. You know, speaking of AI, I think AI is actually going to replace a lot of management jobs in the world. But it's going to replace bad managers, not good ones. Because think about what a manager does. A typical manager, their task should be broken down into two areas. The one is the strategic decision making. The other is the engaging, the motivating, the empowering, and inspiring of your people. A good manager does both. A bad manager only focuses on the decision making, on the data. I have the data. I know everything. I'll make the best decisions. But guess what's going to happen? AI is going to have that data. AI is going to make better decisions. So if you're a bad manager that only focuses on that, poof, you're no longer needed. But if you're a good manager that knows how to engage and motivate and inspire others, you are going to become in demand. You are going to become in demand. In fact, the next book that I'm working on is all around the leadership of the future, leadership in the year 2025. And this is one of the common things that I'm hearing. We need more people who have those skills. One of the most crucial skills, I think, that we're starting to see is this notion of having managers in place who act like coaches and mentors. A lot of people in this room might be thinking, well, we have a coaching and a mentoring program, and most organizations around the world do. But it's not good enough. Because when you find out how these coaching and mentoring programs actually work, really what happens is a manager says, I will coach you, I will mentor you. And they do, up until a point. But the second that that person that they're coaching and mentoring gets to their level of success, what happens? They keep them there for all eternity. Right? They keep them there. In other words, as a manager, as a leader inside of your company, you should believe and you should wake up every single day with the belief that your job is to help make other people more successful than you. You should believe that every day your job is to help make other people more successful, yes, than even you. Those are the types of people we need inside of our organizations. How many of you have kids? Okay, quite a few. So if you have a child, you'll know that when your child does something that you don't know how to do, or when your child becomes successful in something that you couldn't do, you don't look at your child and say, "How dare you? I am your creator. I couldn't do that. Why are you doing it?" You don't do that. You look at your child and say, "Oh man, that's amazing. Like, I am so proud of you. That is so cool. I believe in you. I'm so inspired by the things that you're able to do." Why can't we have that same mentality inside of our organizations? Where as a manager, if you help make somebody else more successful than you, why can't you look at that person with a sense of pride and say, "That's amazing. I'm genuinely happy for you. I helped build you up. I helped put you in this position, and I'm just very proud. And I'm thrilled that you were able to do that." Why can't we have that mentality? Right? That's what true coaching and mentoring actually means. That's what true coaches and mentors actually do inside of our organizations. The next thing that you can start doing inside of your organizations. I know a lot of us have this mentality and this idea of the employee life cycle. Right? This has also been around for a few decades now, and it's something that most organizations around the world use in some way, shape, or form. And usually the employee life cycle, attract, hire, nurture, retain, blah, 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 blah. And it looks like a wonderful circle. The problem with that is that that's not how employees view their time with you. That's how you view your employees' time with you. But if you were to ask your employees, "How do you view our time with us?" how would they respond? They would probably respond in terms of moments. They would say, "Well, it was a little tough going through the interview process. I'm excited I now have the job. I've been on the job for a couple months. I'm learning some new things. We just bought our first house. We're having our first kid. I got promoted." So if you notice, what starts to happen is that the employee life cycle is starting to be replaced by moments that matter. What are the moments that matter in the lives of your employees? This is not the same thing as an employee life cycle, because an employee life cycle only looks at a part of the picture. You need to view your employees as individuals, not just as workers. And if you can identify the moments that matter in the lives of your employees, you will be able to shape experiences around them. You will be able to shape how they feel during that moment, the spaces that they're in during that moment, the tools and resources that they're going through during that moment. And you will be able to create amazing experiences for them. There's no greater wasted moment that matters than an employee's first day on the job. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to employees and they tell me about their first day on the job, and they all say, "Well, I got there. Yeah, I couldn't really find a parking spot, so I was 10 minutes late. I showed up to my desk. Nobody was there to greet me. There was a computer with a note on it that said, 'Welcome.' I opened the computer. Nothing works. I need to go talk to IT to figure out how to get it set up. I don't know anybody. I eat lunch by myself." That's what you do? That's a terrible wasted moment that matters. An employee's first day on the job is a key moment that matters in the life of an employee. Look at Lego, for example. A lot of people don't know the story of Lego, but as Lego was being developed and built many, many years ago, the factory actually burnt down a couple times as the creator of Lego was building up his stores. And so the factory burnt down, and he had to rebuild it, and it burnt down again. And this is part of the story of Lego. And when employees start working there, they are told the story of Lego. They are shown where the factory burnt down, where it was first created. They build that connection. They build that relationship. They tell stories on that first day to make an employee understand why they belong, why they fit there. There's no greater wasted moment that matters than an employee's first day on the job. Other moments that matters, you have to ask your people. It might be a birthday. It might be being there for 3 years or 5 years. It might be when they get their first promotion, buy their first house, have their first kid. It's up to you to identify the moments that matter in the lives of your employees. That's the crucial thing. So try to think of the time that your employees have with you, not just in terms of an employee life cycle, but in terms of moments that matter in the lives of employees who work there. The last thing that I think you can all do is think of your organizations much more like laboratories and less like factories. Remember the synonyms I gave you at the very beginning? Cog, servant, slave, drudgery, all that sort of stuff. That's how organizations were built. They were built as factories. Embrace the status quo. In fact, they encourage, they keep the status quo. Hierarchy is one of the most resilient structures that we as humans have ever created. We have built perfect factories. And now we're at a time where we need to create laboratories. Test, experiment, iterate, use data, embrace failure if it happens. Think of your organizations like a laboratory and less like a factory. Now look, guys, I'm not standing up here because I was an executive at a large organization. In fact, I've never spent a day in my life working in HR. Not one. I'm up here because I worked in an organization just like yours, and I had terrible experiences. Now, I'm not special. You probably all have many employees just like me inside of your organizations who go through that same experience, who are willing to help. Right? So tap into those people. Think about what the world would look like if we all invested in creating great experiences. Right? Think about what that kind of a world would look like. We would be happier. We would be more engaged. Think about the problems that we would be able to solve, the opportunities we would be able to unlock if every organization in the world invested in creating great experiences for their people. Think about what your organization would look like if it invested in employee experience. And ask yourself, wouldn't you want to work for that kind of an organization? Thank you.